U.S. beef lost a legal battle recently. Today, we discuss the impacts of a dismissed lawsuit and how it may impact the meatpacker issue facing the beef industry in 2022. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. He is my co-host and father, Brandon. If you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe. While you're at it, check out the social media at Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, and Twitter below. For those returning, thank you for coming back. And now to today's topic, which is attempt number 3. We did this twice already last week, and internet was not working, audio was not working. So today, everything has come back. The planets are aligned, and we are going for it. All right, you are still losing your ability to know where your beef originates. We're big proponents of COOL or MCOOL, however you want to say it, country of origin labeling. But an appeals court out of Denver, Colorado, dismissed a lawsuit presented by New Mexican ranchers back in 2020. The lawsuit was filed in January 2020, and over 2 years later, filming in March, article came out early March, like March 4th-ish. They were dismissed because of they were dismissed in a 21-page opinion from one of the judges. There were 3 judges that ruled. 2 said nope, dismissed. One did state on the behalf of the ranchers and said, hey, I absolutely agree. But part of the majority opinion, part of the dismissal opinion, said this in quotes: allowing plaintiffs being the ranchers, to impose a different label standard would impose a requirement different from what the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service, FSIS, has already approved as consistent with Federal Meat Inspection Act. Okay. I don't know what all was in this lawsuit, right? But the fact that we are saying MCOOL or COOL, again, however you want to say it, M in front of COOL is simply mandatory country of origin labeling. The fact that we can't label things saying where they are from, I don't understand how that really has any impact into the food safety. So with that, we're going to start from there, and I'll give it Dad's take again on attempt number 3.
Well, a full disclosure, I actually know what we're going to talk about this time. Usually we do these, and I have no idea what we're going to talk about. You whether it's one of our hangouts like this, or an episode of In the Shoot, or Ag Shorts. And certainly the bloopers, I have no idea what's coming. But yeah, so this is something that just grates on me. I mean, first of all, did they change the label? I don't think you can change a label.
No,
you can put something else on there or with
exactly.
it.
Now, here's the other thing too, though. Like, this isn't just for ranchers. Like this of all things, that I don't understand why the public is not in an uproar and an outcry about this, because this pertains not just to ranchers, United States ranchers, but it also is to the consumers. It's literally benefiting everybody that's within the meat consumption, production. Like it doesn't matter. Like, I don't understand why this is not a thing.
Well, everybody screams, especially consumer advocates, about, oh, we need more information. We need more information. This to me is like somebody taking a pack of cigarettes and right next to the Surgeon General's warning about how bad cigarette smoking can kill you and cause birth defects and all of that, that you take a little sticker and you put on right next to that, and it says, this is bad.
Right.
And now it negates everything that is said. This is an additive. It doesn't change the label.
Right. It has nothing to do with the food safety.
No. But somebody sounds like, as is typical and this is the problem with judges, or wasn't this like the 10th Court of Appeals?
Yeah, it was the 10th.
It was, okay. And you have people that are in positions to make decisions that have absolutely no idea. Okay, that's one thing. Now, how do they get to know something? And that is where you have your representatives or attorneys generally in a court like this that are informing them of why are we here? why is this our stand? Why are we in disagreement with somebody else who has another stand about how this works? That's what it's about. And it's about being informed enough. And you can have the best argument, but if you've got somebody who perhaps doesn't like anything for a personal bias, it's hard to beat that. And I don't know that that's the case, but it sure smells like it. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, what good sense does this make to rule like this when this is simply an additive? It is not changing the label, doesn't do anything for the safety, it doesn't negate or get around any safety issues. This is about where it's from. That's
Right.
a good thing. It's about, I know the origin of my safety or my food here, and the probable safety or the chance that the safety of this food integrity has been met.
Right.
There's a lot of I can't think of anything negative about it. That's the whole issue, and that's what drives me crazy about country of origin labeling, is that it's political. It is not about safety.
Well, and the other thing too is the point that is really important is that this dismissal has the ability to influence law and policy. By dismissing this, the case, I don't know if they can go to another appeals court or what the circumstances are, but yeah, I don't know if this completely kills it from here on out. But this
From here it would go to the Supreme Court.
Right. Well, that's my point though. Even after being dismissed, can it still go to the Supreme Court?
Absolutely.
It can.
If you get enough money to put. Oh, sure.
But that's the point. Is this does, in my argument, I think it should go to the Supreme Court, because this needs to be something that is addressed at the highest court in the United States, because it's a United States thing. We have origin labeling for other things. We don't have it for beef yet. There was a bill recently, last year, 2021, that was introduced. First of all, I don't even know if it passed, but all it did was it switched out some vocabulary to try and make, instead of making a brand new, never mind. I've been down that road before. Whatever. The
Frustrated often.
Yeah. The point is though that this is something that benefits consumers, producers, and everybody in between, and it needs to be in law. And yet our politicians haven't done it, and we need the help from the court, the judiciary system, to help force this. And if they are able, I would think, if they are able to say, hey, yeah, this is lawful, maybe that will get some fire under people to get them to move towards that more. I don't know.
Well, and you're right. This has to do or can affect policy a lot. And we're talking policy. We're talking trade policy, imports, exports, mainly the import portion of this for us in the U.S. And I say us, I mean as consumers and producers. But when you take a look at what drives an issue, what is it that you normally look at? Say, what do you follow to see where somebody stands on something?
Well, I was going to say it's typically somebody's letter, either it's an R or a D.
Well, but yeah, well, it can be that, but ultimately, what motivates them? Money.
Probably money, yeah.
And through a lobbyist on that end of it. But who's employing that lobbyist, and what are they saying? So if you have some of your packers that we have hacked on, and
don't worry, we'll hack on them later too. I have a second part of this conversation.
Okay, but if you get, you can see this, guys. This is not scripted. I mean, we've talked about this before. And it was an abject failure. I don't know where he's headed with this next, other than we hate Packers and what they're doing. They're necessary. Not that I hate them. I just don't like what goes on with how they do stuff. Right? I mean, we have to have them. Somebody's got to process our meats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
They're large and efficient. Good. Okay, but here's the problem: when you have an influence in these packers who are making money on not just the packing end, but they're also making money on the production end, what products do they want to put through their packing facilities? Right. If they can bring stuff in from out of country,
and it's cheaper,
way cheaper, and it's not necessarily safer.
No,
but they can do it cheaper. They don't care about the safe. They care about the cheap.
Right.
And so they're going to increase their profits if follow the money. That's where I was headed with that.
Which
And then,
is an important part too, because this relates directly to what happened recently with Brazil.
right.
There were issues. Was it mad cow? I don't remember what the issue was. There was
Well,
a disease or something happening in the cattle that were being
y-
butchered in Brazil.
yeah, I think
And
it was mad. I think it was mad cow
I think it
was
was.
picked up encephalitis,
And
bovine
in
encephalitis.
Canada, they stopped it. Of all countries, China stopped it. They stopped bringing those
Or stop their
livestock.
imports.
Yeah, they're like, nope, we're not doing this. But the
Right.
United States didn't. And why? Because the packers don't have to say where the meat is coming from. So,
Right.
in potential, I doubt it, but there was a potential that an American consumer could have had a mad cow steak on their plate at one point, because we don't know if that animal was coming from Brazil, or if it came from the United States, or if it came from China. You don't know where it's coming from. And that I think leads to the point that you're making, because we don't have that labeling. Other countries stopped it, but we didn't. And that could have snuck through, and it probably did. I have no doubt.
Don't know. I mean, but when these other countries stop those imports from that country, I think you know where it came from. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
go back to the source, right?
Yeah.
But so my point to this is, when you have judges that are sitting on an appeals court that have never even smelled a cow, you know, they know what an In-N-Out burger is, or a Five Guys, or whatever chain, or McDonald's, you know, that they like to get their favorite burger from. That's as close as they've ever gotten to it. They know sickum about anything on the food safety. They just assume it's safe. So then when you have the lobbyists telling them, hey, I'm screaming louder, or, you know, there's 5 of us or 6 of us in this case, and they've only got 3 or 4, you can tell we're right because of the sheer numbers. You know, it's hard to overcome someone's ignorance.
Right.
And not that they're stupid, they're ignorant to the facts. And it's whoever makes the better argument. But you also, these judges aren't stupid. They can see what kind of potential outcome can happen when you take an industry and you start to throttle it back a little bit on its profits. What could happen there? What side of the aisle do you stand on? And for someone to be a judge, there still is some personal bias there. I don't care who
Right.
you are. I don't care. You know, judges are supposed to look at the facts, and the facts and how they pertain to law, or the facts of, you know, the case at hand. But you have to put that bias aside, and some of them are not. Some of them don't hide that bias quite so much. So they may or may not have a thought about, oh, what does this do? How is this going to affect things in the future? You don't know. I'm not saying they do, but the potential is sure there. And especially if you've got someone who's making that argument, you know, in front of them as part of their argument, that may not necessarily be that relevant to it. So they take everything in its totality.
Yeah. I just very frustrated that an appeals court, again, it was a 2-1 decision. There were 3 judges that presided over the case. 2 dismissed it. 1 did rule in favor of the New Mexican ranchers. The other part too is the legal system, and the frustration I have is that this was filed in January of 2020, and we are now in March 2022, and it's just coming to the district court, you know,
The appeals court.
or the appeals court.
Yeah.
It's just so frustrating that it something that is this important, and has been, not just for the last 2 years. It's been like this for decades, but somebody finally had the ability, or the reasoning behind filing in January 2020, and it has taken 2 years, over 2 years, to get to this point. That in itself is frustrating, especially when going back to the legislation could be coming out saying this is what will happen, this is what the law will be. Instead, we're trying to go through the judicial system and get this done. That it's just, it's time consuming. It's funding consuming for sure. I guarantee it.
The funding is whoever's got. If you're on the side of you know, getting the country of origin labeling that's whoever is in that organization. If you're a member of that organization, in this case, sounds like the New Mexico stock growers or producers or several groups, maybe, I don't know, but that's who funds that. That's there's no tax dollars that make
Right.
this wheel turn. It's about people's livelihood and whether they want to stay in business or not, and you're funding that, which is also can be another really great ploy. He who lasts the longest in a court case wins. Doesn't matter whether you're right or not. Somebody might just say, in this case, we've gone to the appeals court. We can't afford this. We just cannot stretch this out another 2 to 3 to 4 years before the Supreme Court sees it.
Right.
You know,
Well, and the
which
Supreme
is
Court could always just not see it also and say
they don't
hey,
have to take it.
it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah. But
No.
because what I could foresee the Supreme Court saying, we're not going to take it. This is a legislative issue, not our
Right.
problem. And then done. And then
And-
just based off of that decision alone, now we're
Right.
back to trying to fight politicians to put something into law.
Well, and I think ultimately that's the best case. That's the best way to do that, is that you do that at the local level, within your states, and then you press, our Senate, U.S. Senate and Congress to do the same thing. That's supposed to be a representative form of government, and that's how that works. But in the meantime, look at the swath of destruction that can take place,
Right.
over that. But it makes me want to. I wish I could go back, and maybe there is some statistics somewhere, somebody's kept track and in a historical context, to see what happened, what's going on with our judicial load, compared to 150 years ago.
Mm.
And obviously, we got a denser population, but we're also a much more litigious society, clogging up these courts. I mean, you can't hardly turn on a television without seeing some ambulance chaser saying, "Hey, have you ever been exposed to? Have you ever had? Did anybody prescribe?
It's
Did you
not
have
only
this
that.
surgery?"
It's not only that though, too. Though you got, for example, I looked on some news sources yesterday. Former President Trump has at least a half dozen lawsuits against the Democratic National Convention and committee, and then against Hillary Clinton's what was it, campaign staff and all that for Russian collusion allegations. That in itself, right? But that in itself, the fact that he has just a half dozen for one particular instant, like I think that bolsters your point, though, is we are very much a litigious society now.
Well, we become that way because that's how we settle things.
Right.
Dueling is out of style. Dang. Give a bunch of these people a little playground and some flintlock pistols. Hey, what the heck? We can sell tickets. I'm just kidding. But we fight things out in the courts instead of coming to an agreement about something or talking through things. Yeah, you can still agree, but take a look at what that's going to do. If you and I get into a disagreement and we're going to go to court over it, how much am I going to spend on an attorney over some issue? And I think that's where good common sense goes out the window. Yeah, we could do something wrong, or I could have tried to take advantage of you, just willingly taken advantage of you. You know it, and I know it. And what's it going to cost you in the long run? Are you going to win? Am I going to win? And it's like some people are jerks. Some people are bullies. Some people, that's how they make their living, is to try to take advantage of other people. You're not going to stop that. That's always been that way. But in the larger sense, where it's more of a wide sweep, you could almost call this it probably is a class action suit, because it's a lot of people in an area of that particular subject, where it's kind of the labeling, which affects a bunch of people. I don't know that, but it could be, depending on how they filed it. But when you do that, and you do that on every issue out there, there just seems to be hardly anything that isn't in the courts. We've clogged them up to the point where, yeah, you don't get any satisfaction one way or another, or a culmination of, okay, this is the way it's going to be.
Right.
So the other problem with that is then sometimes courts tend to legislate instead of going back down to they'll set a court precedent. And it's like
Right.
that's what are you doing? That's not right. You shouldn't be. Courts should not be setting legal precedent
Right.
for laws. They should be interpreting those laws that have been done by the legislature. That's a separation of powers of your branches.
But I mean, going back to like, you know, and taking it from that perspective, maybe that's where they're coming from, is that they don't want to be setting a law. But it's frustrating because this is something that clearly needs to be taken care of, and so somebody has found another way to try and address it, and it's just getting
Well,
stomped down.
let me ask this: as I'm assuming who filed the lawsuit?
It was two New Mexican ranchers. I don't remember their names. I'd have to look at the article. Article will be down below. Let me open this up real quick.
As I recall, there was a judge in it with the same name as one of the ranchers.
There
to
was.
cause a little confusion.
Yeah, and I never found out about that. Robin Thornton and Michael Lucero were the
Lucero,
two
there you go.
ranchers, and then I think it was Vincent Lucero was
The judge,
judge,
one of the judges on the appeals court.
Yeah, but yeah, Carlos Lucero.
Okay.
He he was the one that gave the dissenting opinion, and he said the label is misleading when it is used on products from animals raised outside the U.S. Lucero also said he believes the labels violate USDA's regulation that bar meat from giving any false indication of false indication of origin. But so that's his point, is he says
He sided with the ranchers.
Yeah, he says I agree with the ranchers because the fact that there is no labeling, it gives a false indication of origin, because everybody, we've said this before, everybody assumes the meat is from the United States, and it's not.
It's not.
But again, that was the one thing, is he related to one of the ranchers, Michael Lucero? I don't know.
He shouldn't be because you have laws of affinity and consanguinity, I think is the term, where you cannot hear a case when you're related to, and it's like 3 degrees away, like great grandparents. You're not going to, they're probably not around, but I mean, so you have to have at least in different laws in different states, but in Montana, I know it's like 3 degrees away.
Yeah, but that was his point. Judge Moritz was the one that gave the part saying it's inconsistent with the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Okay. Again, my point being,
based on what? I'd like to know what the exact language he is looking at.
But what she said, it was talking about safety. That has nothing to do with safety. It has all things to do with origin and knowing where your meat came from. So that's where
it does relate to it. It's implied,
right?
But it's not specific. But it's not specifically
correct
doing that or mandating whatever it is.
Yeah, I'd like to get my hand on that opinion and dissenting opinion someday. Anywho, we're gonna get to the next portion of this, which is meat consumption in the United States. So
eat more beef.
Well, America has, believe it or not.
They have, yes.
Another article that I read about current meat consumption rates in the United States was that meat purchasing is actually over 3% higher than pre-pandemic trends. So we're looking back into 2018, 2019. We're purchasing meat at 3% higher. That's great. That's a huge increase, actually, if you think about it. However, the purchases have drastically shifted from restaurants or delivery meals to home cooked meals. The money saved from delivery and prepared meals has shifted to the grocery store specifically, with more people making their own meals. So here's my concern. When will the cost savings shift from less meat purchasing when will it shift from where you get your food to what food you get? Because right now, with the meat packer responses, and this is where we can start digging into the meat packers, because the meat prices increased, people said, okay, I'm going to save money or spend the same money I would have outside, and I'll spend it at home. But as the meat prices continue to rise, and now we're looking at inflation as well with other stuff, but now as meat prices continue to rise, when will the packer inflation, yeah, I'll say that, the packer inflation, the packer imposed inflation, when will that start resulting in less meat being purchased? Right now people are buying over 3% than what they've did 2.5 years ago, but when will that shift to suddenly, oh, 3% less, 6% less, 10% less than what we did 2, 3, 4 years ago?
Well, I think there's a number of things there. I think different factors. One, meat consumption is up 3%. Is that overall, or was that just personal consumption?
So I wouldn't say
Personal purchase.
consumption, it just says purchasing, because you don't
Okay.
know if people are always eating all their stuff too,
Well, okay,
it's implied, but
it's implied. You would assume that, but okay. So personal purchases
right,
are up 3%.
a little
How
over 3,
much?
yeah.
How much of a drop in meat purchases, beef purchases through restaurants? How much did that drop? You know, it did because of the pandemic lockdown. How
Right.
much?
And let me pull that article up because I don't recall seeing that.
Because that's a statistic, and you know what statistics do.
Yeah. Well, and if all people are asking where I get this, both articles will be down below. They're both from Drover's magazine. They said nearly all American households, 98.5%. So we're looking at 98.5% of US households. The volume sales were almost 4%. They were 3.9. I said 3. The increase, yep, tracking. 74% of Americans describe themselves as meat eaters. 50.4 visits per shopper per year into the meat section.
A week. Yeah.
Yep. Now, okay, here we go. Volume remains significantly above pre-pandemic levels for fresh, up 3.7 since 2019. Prepared meat, up 4.3% since 2019. Fresh beef volume increased 5% since 2019. Bacon up 7%, and fresh lamb sales increased nearly 20. That right there tells me people are buying a lot of lamb because they can't afford beef, probably.
Well, but lamb can be pretty dang expensive too, depending on the cut.
Meat, okay. Meat consumer, whoa, what just happened there? Meat consumers shopped online more, 61%, up from 39%. Okay. That's just because, yeah, well, that or people, they make the delivery and they go park in the pickup and they bring it out to you.
Yeah.
People are eating 80% of meals at home, down 88% at the pandemic peak. Okay. And 57% prepare 4 or 7 dinners per week with meat. More than half of meat shoppers, 51%, say websites, apps, blah, 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 blah. So that might be the closest we get. They're eating 80% of the meals at home, down from 88% during the pandemic in 2020.
And yeah, there were still people that are going to buy their food and have it delivered, right?
Right.
Because that's a convenience thing. They like that. They don't know how to cook, don't want to cook. There's a number of things there, but I think for the most part that I think that's also where it diverged. And what I mean by that is people are home. They're home. They're not working necessarily, or they're not going out. They got nothing else to do. And they're like, you know what? I wonder how hard it is to do that. How can I make fill in the blank?
Yeah.
And they go, well, let's try it. What's the worst that could happen? If it doesn't taste good, we just won't do it again. And you know what? They started getting some skills or reviving some skills that they may have had or lost or never done it before. And they started cooking. It saves money to do that at home. I don't care who you are. If you take a steak and you buy it through over a counter and you take it home and cook it, it is cheaper than going out to a restaurant, having someone else cook it, having someone else deliver it, having someone else clean up after you. That's the way it is.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking about the multiple charges in that. If you use an app, right? You're probably either paying the app to have the app, or you're getting the what they call the convenience fee for the online transaction. That's one.
Yep.
You're paying the preparer,
Mhm.
the fast food place, the pizza place, the the hipster place that happens to prepare your food just the proper way you like it. And then I
Everything
did.
stirred counterclockwise,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I had to throw the hipster stuff in there. And then you gotta and then you got the delivery fee, right? So you just did 3 separate transactions for
Right.
one meal.
Right.
And even if it's just $1 or 2, that's at least, you're probably closing in on just $10 just on that. And then that's on top of
Yeah.
the meal.
Depending on what it is. And I don't know, I tend to tip. I
Mhm.
tend to tip pretty damn, even if they're bad service, they still get a tip, and it's
A tip, yeah. It's not great, but it's still give them something. But
right.
that's
But
assuming no tip whatsoever, though. That's
yeah,
just for
but
the fees.
right. But you're looking 18 to 20% is what I normally tip for a good meal, and a good, and what I should say, a good service. Even if the meal's not that great, but the service was great, you're tipping for the service,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, because it goes
And
to the server. Yeah.
it goes to the server, but I've also tipped whoever was cooking that meal. I want to, who did that? Who cooked
Mhm.
this steak? And I have talked to a chef personally on an exceptional job that they've done and wanted them to have a tip. It's rare, but I've done it. And so anyway, you still have an outlay of that. When you have that at home, what kind of a tip do you get? I might get give a, I don't
A
know,
beer.
a beer or a firm slap on the rump. Who knows? It's not cash out of my pocket. I can tell you that. The
Right.
beer might be, but still, home consumption is always cheaper unless you really mess it up and you got to do it twice.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but my point is, people were forced to do that, and so some of them took the time to go. You know what? One thing we have to do, whether we're locked down or not, we got to eat.
mhm.
And now we got some time on our hands. Well, let's try it, and see how we can do this. I don't know how to cook, but we got to eat. So they do the best they can, and to probably increase some skills. It'd be interesting to know what the cuts are. What is more
Right.
or what was sold more? Is it some of your steak cuts, roasts, burger? I suspect burger probably went up a bunch because you can do anything with burger. I mean, it's the staple of the meat world. It's like the flour and eggs of baking. It's
Yeah.
hamburger. You can do
I
everything with
don't
it.
know, because all it says is uh prepared prepared meats were up 4.3, which that to me, that's like, I'm taking
Well,
that as sliced deli meat, probably
sausage.
processed stuff, sausage. Yeah. Now then they said fresh
It might be
beef,
burger as well.
maybe, but then fresh beef volume increased nearly 5%. So to me,
Okay.
that's your
That's burger,
steaks,
I would
that's your
think.
burger. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm assuming.
All your different
There's
cuts. Yeah.
there's no definition here in this
That
article.
would be interesting to know how that's broken down.
Yeah.
And if that changed over time, if people got tired of eating burger and went, you know what? This isn't that tough. I'm gonna try some steaks.
Right. Well, and
Some
that's
petite
another,
sirloin, something inexpensive.
but that's another point too, is, for, I was looking at on a shelf today, as I went to the grocery store. It was I think it was 13.75 for one ribeye steak off the shelf. And when people could look and they can go, oh, I can get 6 chicken breasts for $9,
Right.
or I can get 2 petite sirloins for that. They start choosing different cuts or different meat sources because of the impact of that.
Well, and that's where I was going to head later on with that is whether inflation, you may peak out on what you're going to buy, and you may try some things. You may try some of that, a ribeye.
Right.
But you're going to buy the cheapest thing you can to make your money stretch because you didn't have much income coming in. And now with inflation, you've got even less than you had. There was, the cost of daily maintenance one puts up with. They do it. For instance, if you got a job and you got to go to work, you're going to pay high gas prices. You got no choice. You got to go to work. You got to get that. You got to keep the hamster wheel turning.
Right.
So as that price of fuel increases, you've only got so much money to go around. You're not making an increase. You're not keeping up with inflation. So you're making less. What has to go? What happens? And this is where people get behind on, say, a house payment or a car payment.
Right.
Got to keep that car going because that's how I get to work. Got to fill it with fuel because that's how I get to work. And then you get behind, it's like, we can't make a whole house payment. Oh my God. What are we going to do? And then pretty soon, the next thing you know, they got a mortgage company knocking on the door saying, hey, you no longer live here. We tried to get you to pay your bill we worked with you for 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year, and it ain't happening. Yeah, you've made a couple of payments here and there, but there's comes a time that's got to stop. That's the kind of real world stuff that happens. In the meantime, they're spending more and more on fuel and keeping that car payment going, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper cuts of meat.
Right.
Or smaller portions of meat, or they're making alternatives to whatever they can do. They're eating a lot more breads. Bread's cheap. It's high carbos, no protein there, but the carbos keep you going. So you start making some choices like that, and it falls off, and it falls off over and across the board for most everybody. When you're talking 13, what'd you say, $12.99, $13.99? Was it a pound for
I think it was
ribeye?
It was just the solid steak. I don't know what, I didn't even look at the weight of it. It was a pretty hefty steak, so it's probably closing in on 16 ounces. But
it's $13.99 a pound, or for that piece of meat.
It was $13.75 for that piece of meat.
Okay, so it was yeah. I've been interesting if you'd have caught what the weight was per pound or how much per pound, but you take a look at that and what we get as a producer for for an animal, and even a finished animal at this point. Today, I'm going to start finishing this heifer, and locally, I'm selling that the entire animal $4.99 a pound cut, or $3.99 a pound cut and wrapped, and we're making a modest profit. The butcher is, and the people who are getting it, they're getting everything. They're getting burger, they're getting steaks, they're getting roasts, they're getting however they want it cut. It's a significant amount of money because they're buying a whole animal
at one time,
but they're saving money overall.
Well, and
that's where your freezer space comes in.
And that's where I saw something on TikTok the other day where they asked a rancher to kind of break it down a little bit, and he goes, "Listen, you're gonna be paying for them. It was $5.99. He goes, you're gonna be paying $5.99 for burger. That's how it is. But guess what? You're also paying $5.99 for sirloin steak,
exactly,
for ribeye steak. You're paying $5.99 for, if you choose to, you can get a whole prime rib per pound, or you can do rump roast. Every single cut is $5.99 a pound. And when you think of it that way, you're like, oh wow, okay.
Right.
And maybe it doesn't last you a year, maybe it lasts you 2. You're paying a big price up front, but what's the long term? If you think about it, it's your meat investment in a sense.
You're going to eat anyway.
Right.
Here's the issue for most people, and I think
the space,
is the space. It's the storage. And that's where you take a quarter of a beef is not that much. I mean, people think, oh, a quarter of a beef, holy cow, look at the size of that thing. Well, once the head and hide and guts and legs are knocked off that thing, it reduces the size substantially.
And the bone. Then you take the bone.
Yeah,
out.
the bone.
Yeah.
And some bones left in, on like the T-bone, rib, some of that, a lot of boneless stuff, you can reduce your weight, but you're still buying that bone to begin with because you're buying the carcass weight. And so some of it gets bone, some of it not, but a lot of burger goes in, or trim goes into burger, and then you got a little suet in there. So it's palatable. So it doesn't fall apart. I mean, there's reasons to do what you do and trim it well, but you're still, what you get, a quarter of a beef is not as much as you think. I had a friend of mine text me here, I don't know, a week or 10 days ago, and he says, hey, wow, we bought a quarter beef. I thought I was really getting something. He's got like a family of 5. He says, that didn't last long. It made it like 3 months. I go, well,
should have gotten a whole cow.
That's about right. Yeah, exactly. And he's looking at doing something like that, but the first time he'd ever done it, and he said, man, I don't know. I said, well, it's not that much, and you're looking at if you take an animal to, 1,400 pounds, and your carcass weight is 60% of that, that's quite a bit.
Right.
But that's a lot of outlay, but that's a whole beef, and a whole beef will feed you for a while. So there's that.
The other part too is this is, I talked about the Packer issue with, in terms of, they continue to raise the prices. It's not assisting in putting that money back towards ranchers at all, because they're squeezing both ends. But one CEO, and I always forget which one it was of the four. There's Cargill, Tyson, National Beef, and JBS. I think it was JBS that he said his intent is to make it so that people no longer know what real beef is and that they can produce plant-based protein.
Right.
So to
not
me,
the JBS.
Yeah. So to me, that's not only insidious, but it's absolute criminal, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to destroy one industry so that they can get a foothold and cornerstone on their own processed stuff. If anybody has followed this channel at any length of time, they know how much I hate that, in the sense that not only is he personally attacking us, but the other problem too is I try to eat a very healthy lifestyle and take care of my own body. The United States is very much the same way. We have recognized that processed foods are not good. What are plant-based proteins? They are processed foods. They are not good for you. I am not like, yes, you can have your plants and you can have your veggies and all that stuff. I have no issue with that, but they are not good for you. When you process it like that, it turns into something totally different. And I read an article last summer, almost a year ago, that this stuff it doesn't have the vitamins that meat does. Guess what? Meat also doesn't have the vitamins that vegetables do. So what's the answer? Get a well-balanced diet of real meat and real fruits and veggies, but don't process it, because when you process it, then it totally messes it up. You're putting stuff in there that's not good. You're putting extra things that could potentially slip through the cracks. It's disgusting. It's gross, and it's created obesity in the United States. And this I see as another stem into the obesity issues.
Here's something I see. That's one aspect of it, where it's your health, your safety, mainly your health issue of it. Here's something I see that's even a little bit more insidious than that. When you say that you're gonna get it so people don't know the difference, that implies you're gonna take their choice away.
Right. That's a good point too. Yeah.
And when you
won't
take
have meat available at all, I'm just gonna feed it to you. Yeah.
Right. And you're gonna like it. So when you do that, now you are also controlling a food source, complete control.
Right.
When you take people's choice away. And so you want to subjugate people. I've said this before, and I know it sounds like a off the wall quackery, but you know what? Henry Kissinger said it. We've said this before. He who controls the food controls the people.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at China in the 1970s. That's exactly what happened.
Look at China and look at Korea now.
Yeah, North Korea specifically. Yeah.
Yeah, their people are starving to death.
Right. No, I agree, and it's very concerning, because that and I mean, you also control food. You can also put what's in that food, and you can
do what you want.
I mean, I can think of a lot of insidious things. I can think of, we looked at the 1970s, 1980s, what doctors did to Native American women when they went in for an appendectomy and they came out with a hysterectomy.
Right.
You look at things like that. I could see what you could do with food. Oh, suddenly people are infertile. Oh, suddenly people have diseases that, oh, now we have to provide the cure for, and things like that. I can see a lot of evil in this world, and that's coming right from there.
Get a fourth shot because the other first three didn't work like they're quite.
I'm not going to talk about that one, but yeah.
Yeah.
But no, like, that's what I'm concerned about, is because when you start creating food, that's when things can get put in the food.
There's a difference between producing food and creating it.
Yes.
Big difference.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look at also taking the meat, cutting meat how it is, and then presenting it for consumption, right? If you are adding anything, it's burger. It's just a little, like you said, suet, which is it's a little fat base for people to understand that it keeps burger together as a patty and stuff like that. But then you look at things like your cereals, that comes from a grain, and it is created and morphed into what you see: cornflakes, Cheerios, Fruit Loops,
it's processed.
But it's processed, and there's things that are put into it. And so you're walking the line of producing and creating food there, and that's where you get concerned.
I believe they call that fortified. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fortified with whatever essential vitamins and minerals, makes you strong, makes you run faster.
It does not make you run faster, that's for sure.
Well, it's all about marketing.
Now, CRISPR. I know I introduced it to you when we did takes 1 and 2, but on take 3, if anybody is unfamiliar with CRISPR, it's a technology that you can use to edit genes, and as of such, will likely change the world. This is the direct quote. The essence of CRISPR is simple. It's a way of finding a specific bit of DNA inside a cell. After that, the next step in CRISPR gene editing is usually to alter that piece of DNA. So the potential for this is things to make it really easy for people to understand. If I want a boy instead of a girl, I could potentially go into the DNA, change that DNA, and make the boy into a girl before it's born. Or I think also another potential for this is, I know that my child might have Down syndrome. A way to correct Down syndrome before they are born is to remove a chromosome. That's the type of editing, from what I understand, that they can do. Now, CRISPR has potentially, I think it was an article that I read off of Facebook, of all places, believe it or not, where the FDA has said that it will allow CRISPR meats. So that's another concern I have as well with this increase in meat consumption. What kind of edits would they potentially do to these animals for meat? Got it. Probably people are going to say, it'll be, you increase the meat production part, the muscling portion of the animal. Maybe it's higher testosterone so that it packs on weight faster. I can get where that would be beneficial, but it is a concern because I don't completely understand this technology. And maybe this is something that I should start learning about, and we can have a real discussion about it with somebody. But that's something that I also see as a potential problem for consumers, where we've talked about the plant-based protein. We're looking at plant-based stuff that looks like meat, maybe tastes like meat. I'm going to try this one day just because I want to try it and see what it is. But the plant-based protein where you're creating it, and then I see CRISPR being kind of in that line as well. And that's a big concern for me.
Well, first of all, CRISPR is an acronym. What's the acronym?
Yeah. Standby.
Standing by. So in the meantime, just a word of warning: when you go to try some of this fake food, get yourself a set of Depends. You might need it for a while.
I know I looked this up at one point. What's it?
Yeah,
what's it stand for?
I just wanted to, because I remember we talked about it before. You asked me if I knew what CRISPR was. And
there
I'm like,
it is.
It's CRISPR pickles or CRISPR celery, or where you store both of those in the fridge.
Clustered, regularly interspaced, short palindromic repeats.
Palindromic repeats. Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, it's like natural, almost like a polymer, making the same thing over and over. So it's like growing it, right?
Yeah, probably.
I think that yeah. Okay.
You take a section of the DNA out and then you create it and put it right back in. Yeah.
I think so. Well, I've had medical microbiology. I've had tons of chemistry.
Not. I am an artist, as one would say, because I have a bachelor in arts, not a bachelor in
science. There you go. You're a lemon. Anyway, so whenever you do that, to me, this is nothing different than genetically modified grains, right? Some of our GMOs, and to me, it's like a GMO for meat. Only it's a living. They're all living beings, but you got plants and animals, difference.
Well, looking at the Jackson laboratory, which I'm not sure what they do or where they're at, but it says it's easy to disrupt a targeted gene, or if a DNA template is added to the mix, insert a new sequence at the precise spot desired. So that would go exactly to what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, you're talking, when you're doing that, you're changing, adding, moving, or deleting some DNA pairs. Guanine, uracil, adenine, thymine. Those are your 4 basics. And actually, there's 5. There's additive or 1, but when you still got a double helix on most things, on our gene sequencing, and when you change that, yeah, you're going to get a result.
Right.
You know, I think your example with Down syndrome is actually, I think it's a trisomy on 20 chromosome number 21,
Yeah.
but I think that is after fertilization, because it's a trisomy. You've got, you know, both pairs, so you couldn't necessarily do that ahead of time, but certainly in vitro is a possibility. And I think that's what they're doing. And in that way, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of lab research and stuff going on with things just like that. Down syndrome is a big one. It all depends on how you do it too. You know, Iceland said that they were able to completely eliminate Down syndrome. Yeah.
How'd they do that?
Well, guess what? Abortion.
That makes sense.
That's how, yeah. And it's like, okay, that's eliminating the outcome of it. That's not eliminating how you do it. And it's like, all right, there's some ethical.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's an ethical
right?
issue there. Yeah.
Right. So it depends on how they go about it. And this is the problem with things that are reported or things that are their methodology to it, to whatever they're doing. How is it done? Is this sound science, or are you doing something and calling it something else?
Well, and you brought up the GMO part. I have no issue with GMOs if, you know, as long as things are ethically done. There's no harm to consumers and all that thing. But what I concern with is, like, GMOs are typically thought of with crops, right?
Or grains. Yeah.
It's a living thing, but it's not really it is, but it's not. Like, that's how people, you know, understand. It's not like an animal or a human or anything like that. But when you use CRISPR, now you're looking at animals, and that's where I'm concerned with. Okay, we always talk about the care about the animal up until the very moment where it's slaughtered and then butchered for our consumption. What's the impact on this animal, and what's the impact on that animal, and then me as a consumer afterwards? So that's something I'm very, very concerned about with this. You know, we keep talking about, we started with the meat purchasing at a higher level, but then going down this route of why are things happening? What are more efficient ways for the meat packers and producers to create stuff like that? But
let's look at it this way. What do we always want to do with our cattle? What do we want to do with our chickens, pork? You're wanting to produce an animal when it's for protein consumption.
Yeah.
You want to make that animal so that it has a fast gain and it can pack on as much meat as possible on its frame.
Right.
Well, there are some chickens. I mean, those are modified fast, and we really are modifying by selective breeding in one way. We're not doing it with a lab. We're not doing specific gene pairs splicing or changing, but we are creating certain traits, genetic traits that, you know, create phenotypes or, you know, physical traits. So we're always doing that. We're trying to make better and better animals, more efficient, eat less but gain more, you know, on their maintenance. So when you do that, that to me is not gene modification. That is selective breeding. Big difference. But they have selectively bred some things, like some chickens, they're called, you know, like a meat bird, for instance, that gains a lot of weight really fast, and they are for butcher. We've got that now through just breeding, selective breeding. So what's the purpose to doing that when you breed something? Let's say you genetically modify some cattle, and now you've got a steer, for instance, that is so heavy, so thick that it really doesn't get out and graze. You know, it just doesn't move like it should. You got joint issues, you got foot issues. I'm just saying a what if. I'm not saying that could happen, but the heavier something is,
sometimes it's not for the better.
Not for the better. Yeah. Ask anyone who is really heavy, has a lot of weight, and they've lost weight. What's one of the first things they say is that, oh my God, my knees don't hurt.
Yeah.
Well, joints.
I mean, there's a thing that I think it's for every pound of extra weight that you add to your frame, it's like 5 or 10 pounds on your joints. So like they talk about, you know, bodybuilders, they get massive muscles. Like, yeah, they're cool, they're fit and everything, but you see those guys afterwards and their hips and their knees are shot as old men because 250 or 300 pounds on what should be maybe an 180 pound frame, and you've just created damage that you now have to do hip and knee replacements to survive.
Now, arguably, they're living at 60, 70 years old. Maybe they start hurting in their 50s.
Right.
Your animals are not going to live that long.
Right. But their timeline is very similar.
But their timeline is, yes, exactly. So when you do that, what are you doing to that animal? Do we care about that animal's welfare? What does it do to the food source itself? Probably not much. I don't know. Will it affect it when it can't move as much? I don't know. I mean, I know what less exercise with a high food intake will do. It creates fat. And sometimes that fat is dispersed in the meat, which is called the marbling, or it's, overall fat between the skin and the muscling itself. So how does it affect that? Where's that fat? Is there fat anymore? Maybe it's just all meat. Maybe this meat is,
then it wouldn't
there's
be that
a lot
tasty.
of it. It wouldn't be, and it would be tough as nails, so I don't know. I don't know what that is, but I'm a little uneasy. I'm a lot uneasy genetically modifying animals.
I am too. I think what really the point is here is, honestly, as a lab gets more involved in the food creation, I get really, really cautious.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I'm all for medical advancements to try to be proactive about helping something or changing something. I mean, they're doing surgeries on babies in vitro.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's just incredible.
Yeah.
To help a little one, that's just amazing to me. But they're not necessarily splicing genes and stuff. That can be, Mengele type stuff. Joseph Mengele, Nazis were doing all kinds of experiments on people. So, there's a slippery slope there that intentions may be good, but what happens when somebody goes, "Hey, I wonder if." Well, what could, I mean,
and I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced intentions are good when the JBS CEO comes out and says, "I want to be able to create your food."
Right. So, no, I agree. That's a bottom line. That's not even political. That is nothing more than profit.
Yeah. With that, I'm just gonna hang it up right there because we can talk about that forever.
We probably could.
Talked about appeals court or circuit court dismissing a case for labeling because apparently it's not part of the safety portion of food.
On the label, that just is. That's just
whatever. And then of course meat consumption is up, but what are the impacts of that? We've got concerns of that plant-based proteins, potential CRISPR with modification of animals, but things that are concerning in the beef industry, things that should be concerning to consumers of beef. So be on the lookout and know where your food's coming from. And with that, I'll hand it to Dan.
Oh, wow. The floor is mine.
For 2 minutes.
Oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to put an end to this. We're going to stick this hog and put it down quick. So, we appreciate, listening to us and our concerns about it. It's something we're passionate about, because we don't know the people who receive our product, but we care that they're getting a quality product. I mean, that's what this is all about. And we don't care whether it's us personally doing it or as producers at large across the nation. So, and our big payoff is that you keep buying beef, you keep buying, different cuts of meat of any other kind, because agriculture is agriculture, and having that bread, eating that. So, you can pay us in that way, and we'll just pay you with a thank you till you're better paid.